As President Trump continues to battle the federal court judges, will the high court clear his path or try to stop him in his tracks? Joining me now is the host of Sunday Night in America with Trey Gowdy and the one and only Trey Gowdy. He also has a podcast, a Trey Gowdy podcast, which I love. And you are on Perino on Politics, which is where I call up my smart friends. Trey, you qualify. And I am going to ask you about your thoughts on American politics. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, and I was wondering which of your smart friends was busy this morning while you called me.
Yeah. You're also the most humble person I know. So let's start talking about the courts. I just, on Newsroom, spoke to Jonathan Turley. He had a good line. He said that the courts are suffering from injunctivitis, and that the president's agenda is really basically frozen in amber until we get some rulings. And I wondered if you could talk about just the scope and scale of where we are with all of these Supreme Court decisions that we're waiting for, the injunctions that are out there, and how you think it'll turn out this month.
Well, I would add to Professor Turley, I don't think the court wants to find itself where it is, but we have a very active executive, and people can, figure out for themselves why that is. Small majority in the House, filibuster rule in the Senate, and history says he only has 2 years. So he wants to move very quickly. So some of what he's doing is because Congress enabled it. Some of it is just a vacuum, Dana, and nature doesn't like a vacuum. Something's going to fill it. And President Trump has a big personality. He's willing to fill it. I think judges, no one likes making decisions based on paper or mini trials. And that's what an injunction is. It's really a hearing. They want the most amount of information. They want years to make up a decision, not days or hours. So I don't think the court wants to find itself where it is, but they do, because this president has been very, very active, and not legislatively, but via executive fiat. So what are they to do? I mean, they have to rule. They have to decide whether he can deport someone. If they're sitting on an airplane, you can't wait until tomorrow.
But is what the Supreme Court is deciding on the merits or on, I guess, are they saying that you should not have sent these people back to Venezuela or El Salvador? Or are they saying that judge does not have the right to have a national injunction, and then it goes back the other way?
That is a fantastic question, and I'll tell you why. And you just highlighted the problem with injunctive or temporary relief. You have to guess whether or not someone would prevail on the merits.
Right.
When you have a trial, you don't have to guess because the jury's already ruled. But part of injunctive relief is a likelihood of success on the merits. So how do you figure that out, whether you would ultimately win or not? It's a guessing game. So sometimes the president wins, sometimes the president loses, and then you see these are non-really smart lawyers. No matter whether you like their politics or not, they're smart. And they know how to dodge a case if they want to dodge it too, like the word standing. They love the word standing.
What does that mean for people listening?
It means that you're in a position where you can be harmed by what he did. So I'm not subject to deportation, probably, so I would not have standing to challenge something that the president has done. But if I were Venezuelan or El Salvadorian or had overstayed my visa, I would have standing.
I see. Okay, so, and then if you are an opponent of the president or on the merits you disagree with a policy, the way that you deal with that is by filing a lawsuit, right?
It's the only choice you have when you are not in political power. And look, I have this bad habit of trying to be fair. When President Obama was in office, we Republicans would run to court. We would just run to different courts. We would run to the Fifth Circuit. We would run to Texas. Under President Biden, Republicans ran to court. Obama, they ran to court. Trump, Democrats, where else can they go? They don't control the House. They don't control the Senate. They don't control the administrative branch, which doesn't exist except it does. They have no recourse except to go to court. And it's much easier to get a single judge. And all it takes to become a judge is 50 senators plus a vice president. That's all it takes. And you represent literally a small swath of the country. If I can get a single person to overrule the agenda of a duly elected president and I'm in the minority, that's what I'm going to try to do.
Okay, I assume that you don't have, because you're not a justice, Supreme Court justice, though you could be on the list. Do you have an opinion on how they should rule on this, or are you just going to wait and see?
I am not a fan of injunctive relief nationwide.
Okay.
If I were king for a day, I would resign and let you take over. And I would probably have original jurisdiction either in the D.C. Court of Appeals or the Supreme Court. I would not allow a single district court judge, and I clerked for one for 2 years, and many of them are my friends, but they're really neighborhood judges. They're federal judges, but they're neighborhood. I would not allow, it encourages judge shopping, first of all. I mean, you're going to go to Oregon or you're going to go to a state where they're all Democrat judges. You're not going to go to Texas, except Republicans went to Texas. So it's bad to see the judicial branch put in this situation, and it's bad for judges to lack the humility to say, look, I'm not elected. It's not my job to decide this.
So do you think also, having been a member of Congress, that Congress should step up and try to pass some laws that makes things more clear? Because it seems to me a lot of this is ending up there because the laws aren't modern, they're not updated. Congress has this terrible inability to get anything done.
The only part of your question I would amend is I would change it from think to know.
Okay.
Do I know that Congress is to blame for this? Yes. Nature abhors a vacuum. Other than must-pass pieces of legislation, what has Congress done? What did we do when I was there? We investigate, we threaten to investigate, we barely do things that have to be done, and it creates a vacuum. Now, Congress also has created the administrative branch. I mean, why do all these agencies have power? Because Congress bequeathed it to them. And so both affirmatively Congress gave the administrative branch power, and then de facto it creates these voids. And someone's going to fill the void, either an agency head or a president.
Yeah.
So Congress is about 90% to blame for where we are right now.
I agree. I think that probably even goes back to when I was there working on Capitol Hill, late 90s. They could still get some things done, like the Telecommunications Act, et cetera, but a lot of that has stopped and stalled, and I saw that sort of in the second part of the Bush administration. One other thing is that as parties that want to challenge the president forum shop or judge shop, there's a tendency, and I see it even in my own reporting, or when I'm reading the news out loud to people, that, will say that this decision to say that this bill is, or this, the president is now blocked for doing this from a year, immediately journalists and people on both sides will say, oh, well, that's an Obama appointed judge.
Yes.
Or that's a Trump judge. And I do think that all of us are overdoing that. I mean, I've tried to emphasize to people, Supreme Court decisions are typically 9-0.
Yes.
And it's only the ones that are 5-4 or 4-5, or 6-3 that get a lot of attention. How do you feel about is it fair for us to always look to who appointed a judge when discussing their decision making?
I would say it is material, but not always relevant and not always fair. I understand why people do it. I also understand that they leave out the most important part. What do all of these judges have in common, regardless of who appointed them? They were Senate confirmed.
Right.
So if you want to blame somebody like Boasberg, who's been getting a lot of attention lately, I think it was confirmed 96-0.
Good point.
I mean, the fact that you don't like him now, why didn't you ask some of these questions when he was before your committee hearing? I would have to stop and think right now, which president put some of my friends on the federal bench? I would have to stop and think. That's what we want. You have to stop and think. And most judges, we give them life tenure for a reason, so they're not politically wed. But on the other hand, when you use language like some judges, particularly in D.C., which is where a lot of these cases go, when they sound like politicians, we're going to treat them like politicians. And some of these judges, a couple in particular, sound like extensions of the political parties. So quit talking like a politician, and then we'll quit referencing which president put you in office.
Last question for you here. There are many judges apparently still very concerned about their security. Do you think there should be something done by Congress to either provide them more protection?
Yes.
Okay.
One of my, she and I do not probably vote the same way, and we do not have the same political orthodoxy, but she has become a very good friend of mine, and her name is Esther Salas, and she is a U.S. District Court judge whose son was murdered and her husband nearly murdered.
Yeah.
And I
at her home.
At their home by a disgruntled lawyer posing as a delivery person.
Yeah.
So yes, judges need to be safe and secure, and I would prosecute anyone who threatened a judge, and I don't care which judge you threaten. You can appeal them, you can impeach them, you can vote them down, but you cannot threaten them, and you cannot even hint at violence because of something you disagree with.
I just told Bill Hemmer, my co-anchor on America's Newsroom, that I am not following every single in and out of the big, beautiful bill, because I fully believe that at the end of this process, with a Republican Congress and the House and the Senate and the president, that a big, beautiful bill is going to get passed and signed, and it won't necessarily look like the one that the House passed last week, but I'm just not going to get bogged down in the details and the infighting until towards the end, because you can drive yourself crazy doing that. What's it like when you are on the inside of an argument like this and the arm twisting that goes on?
Well, I feel so sorry for speakers and leaders, because you never hear from people who like you. The only ones who schedule appointments are people. So then you have to ascertain their motivation. Are they really genuinely concerned about SALT or Medicaid or defense cuts, or do they just want the attention of being an outlier? And I think Mike Johnson's done a really good job of identifying the ones that just are like what I call Kardashians. They just want attention. I played golf on Sunday with a U.S. senator that will have a very significant role in this reconciliation process. He owes me $100, by the way, but that's a separate.
Maybe we can get that in the bill.
Yeah, he probably would before he'd pay it himself. But I think some of these differences are significant, and I don't want to go into great detail, but I was literally sitting by the president of the United States when he had to call a senator and twist that senator's arm about a month ago on something. So these deficit hawks, or people who call themselves deficit hawks, Dana, here's the other thing you got to kind of not spend a lot of time thinking about, which is they're not willing to talk about what really drives our debt. So you could literally zero out what they're talking about, and you'd still have a deficit. So I just find it funny that they're deficit hawks, but they won't actually address what really drives our debt.
And what really drives the debt are Social Security spending, Medicare spending, and Medicaid spending. There are some Medicaid cuts. I'm sorry, and what?
Interest on the debt.
And interest.
Those four.
And so that's why the market sort of reacted negatively when the bill was first passed, because it ratchets up the deficit, doesn't really do anything to address the core problems. But this has been going on for a long time. I mean, I worked on Capitol Hill in 1996, and the guy I worked for was the co-chairman of the Balanced Budget Amendment. I mean, so, and that, it's never been solved. And then, of course, we had 9/11. So we're going to pay to protect our people. So we do that. Then there's the effort to privatize a tiny portion, if you wanted to, of your Social Security savings. That doesn't happen in 2005 because the Republicans all walked away from it. They didn't back President Bush on that. And when that problem does get solved eventually, when Social Security is actually going bankrupt in the next 6 to 8 years, I think it'll look a lot like what he initially proposed in 2005. I guess what I am frustrated by is what you're saying, is that all these deficit hawks are so upset, but yet nobody is willing to say, here's how we actually solve the problem. Like, what problem are we trying to solve? Let's define that. And I don't think that they've even identified that. What they want to do is get the bill done mostly for permanency-ish of the tax cuts. Is that right?
Yes. They don't want to run for office saying that they allowed your taxes to go up. But if you note, President Trump briefly floated allowing the rate to go up for the super rich.
Yep.
That used to be like heretical in conservative circles. Now he's more of a populist, and it probably is popular to tax people that are above your own pay grade. You kind of draw a limit where at what you make, but everybody above me should be taxed more. I don't. That's one of the core planks of conservatism is reduce limited government. I think it's hard to make a moral argument that taking 40% of what somebody makes is a good idea.
Yeah.
I had Jason Smith on the show. He says we don't have a revenue problem. We have a ton of revenue.
It's a spending.
We just have a spending problem.
And paying the interest on the debt. So like if you have a credit card or a student loan and you know what it's like, if you're not paying the principal, then you've got a problem.
Yes, and they won't talk about the what's untouchable: Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. I get that it's politically unpopular, but the public cannot wonder why we have a deficit and a debt, and also say, I noticed, I guess over the weekend, one of the Nordic countries raised the retirement age to 70.
It was Denmark.
Okay, Denmark. So I'm gonna put that on the list of places not to move to. It's a long list, but 70 is higher than what we are right now.
Yeah.
But if you were a black male, you would die before you became Social Security eligible when it passed. Way back when it passed, your life expectancy was less than your eligibility.
Yeah.
So now, if you're a female, you're going to live into your late 80s.
At least.
It just wasn't designed for this, but politically, what did they do to Paul Ryan? They showed an ad of him pushing a granny off a cliff in a wheelchair. That's what passes for political discourse right now. Pushing an older person off a cliff in a wheelchair.
Let me ask you one other question. The Biden book, or the book about Biden's frailties and mental incapacities, it continues to get headlines. And I wonder about this on Oversight. When it comes to Congress, do you think there should be hearings and investigation, and to what end? Like, what would be the reason to look into that?
I think they can try. I guess the reason is whether or not people covered up the incompetence of the commander in chief. Now, getting people, you can make people come, you just can't make them talk. So how are you going to force them to talk? Part of it's probably covered by HIPAA. Part of it's covered by presidential immunity or privilege. So is it worth looking into? I think politically, voters are going to punish Democrats. Look, I like Ro Khanna as a person, and he doesn't have the defense of being dumb, like some members do. They can say, look, I'm just dumb. He doesn't have that defense. He did a pirouette that would make Dominique Dawes blush on Joe Biden's mental acuity. I mean, you can't have it both ways, Ro. You can't say it's the sharpest version I've ever seen, and then the next breath say, he never should have run. I told everybody that. We know what we were told.
Yep.
And there was an article recently, they made the conscious decision to cover it up because they didn't want Trump to win.
Yeah.
And that is a form of relativism that will be the demise of this republic.
I like to ask, what am I missing? I like to know what's on your minds because I feel like I know less every day.
Well, you know more than anybody that I know, but I run in a pretty loose circle. I think what's on my mind is kind of where we ended, this relativism, that if I'm a Republican, my friends can't be wrong and my enemies can't be right. If I'm a Democrat, the end justifies the means. Covering up Biden's incompetence to keep Trump from winning kind of reminds me of the whole Russia collusion. We've gotten to the point where anything goes because winning is all that matters. And I think that is so self-destructive for a republic. That's what's usually on my mind is the absence of the virtue of fairness. I try to be, look, Jesus did not say love your friends because he didn't have to. He said love your enemies. Due process is not for people we like. It's for people we don't like. And when we start blurring the lines, I worry about our moral compass.
Yeah. Do you find that in your community, there is more I should say, is there more or less polarization in your community than you feel like there is nationwide? I get that sense, but I'm wondering about you.
I just did an event with a guy named Bakari Sellers, who's a commentator on CNN. And he and I have never had a cross word. Jim Clyburn just came to my hometown and to the catcalls of everyone in the audience said he always liked me. So he got run out of town for saying that almost. I think the American people have figured out a way to sit by one another on an airplane without arguing.
I do too.
I just think the politicians haven't done it.
Yeah. All right. Trey Gowdy, great to have you on the podcast.
Yes,
thank you so much.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.